Hi everyone, welcome to this, which is part 3 of making of Lennie's portrait. So it's the third video. The first video showed us working with dry pencils to create Lennie's eyes, and now the second part of the video was laying down of the watercolour pencil for the base painting, the underpainting, and adding water. So this is the third part. I've tried to edit it down as much as possible. It's about sort of 8 to 10 hours I'm pressing down. So some of it is real time, as I explain a technique, and then you just repeat that technique for the fur in other areas. So the first thing I'm going to do with these dry layers is you can see that it almost creates gloss, the way that we applied our base painting, our underpainting, the way we put the pencil down. So we've got those blacks going into greys up into the highlights over those lovely glossy curls. Now we're actually going to knock all of that back first of all using a black pencil. So we're going to work the whole of this next layer just using the black pencil. I just simplified the process. I mean, if I was doing it myself, I'd probably, have 2 or 3 pencils in my hand working the blacks, the greys, and popping in the colours. But to simplify it for the tutorial, we're just going to work the whole layer, the whole coverage in black, and then we'll repeat that using the indigo, our Morton violet, and then our warm and cool greys and the white, and then we'll just refine it with each layer, the same as we do with our others. So I've switched here. If you want to carry on using your Albrecht Dürers or the same pencils that you use for your base painting, that's absolutely fine, but I've switched now to using polychromos. So here it's just black polychromo. It's the first part of the video I'm just doing in real time. I'll show you how literally I'm just pressure wise, it's probably a medium pressure, 3 to 5 again in pressure. I can go back in afterwards, and I will go back in afterwards and just add more. Again, all we're doing is filling the tooth on the pastel mat, same as we do in previous tutorials, working in the direction of the fur to a degree. Over here there's not a lot of fur texture because this is the area that's sunk away pretty much into shadow, and then we've just used warm mid-grey just to give the hint of the shapes of those curls. But you see there, I've just gone over that grey area. I'll go over everything pretty much with the black, because what will happen is the areas that have already got the black darker undertones from the base painting, when I add black to that, it'll just make it richer now with the dry pencil. And obviously the areas that have got the grey and the white and the blue, it'll just become a darker version of that. So it'll still have the details there. It'll just be a much more muted version of the base painting. So we will in fact lose all of this lovely gloss. We'll knock back all of this lovely gloss, which will almost seems sort of I don't know, the reverse of what we're trying to do. We could go straight in, I suppose, and enhance the lights, but like I say, with working on the pastel mat, I work from dark to light. So unless that dark rich shadow is there underneath, when we apply our lighter colour pencils, our lights and our greys and our white over the top, unless there's a dark shadow underneath, they've got nothing to show up against. So it'll just be, if we went in over, say, that brow area on the right hand side now with our light pencils, it would all sort of blend into one light grey white area. There'll be no definition of the darks to create the contour underneath. So anyway, here on the left, like I say, just doing this first part in real time, just to show you sort of the speed that I'm working at, flicking my eyes across to the reference photo as I always do, and we're just enriching that initial layer of the black pencil. And so the next layer, I think, without fast forwarding it, we go then on to our indigos. We start, as always, we start with our dark tone, our contrast, and then we will work with our other darks, which will be a dark indigo and our Morton violet, and then we'll move up to our mid-tones, which will be our the warm greys, cool greys. Here you see I've just speeded up a little bit now because you've got the idea of what I'm doing, and I'm just repeating that process all over Lennie's portrait now. Obviously not on the orangey areas of his brows or his muzzle. So yeah, we'll work up through our darks to our mid-range, to our lights, and then we'll go back to our darks, and then up through our mids and to our lights a couple of times. And each time I say we just refine it, and then we'll use our white to really enhance those super glossy areas. I haven't used a lot of colour like I explained with base painting. I haven't used a super amount of colour in Lennie's fur, and that's because it is so black and glossy. I just felt that we could do it. We've got some blues, obviously the indigo's through there. There is a touch of the Prussian blue as well through some of the base, the undertones. Again, we allow that to shine through. That will shine through even though we put black over our blue and over our reds. It just means that we've still got it shining through. That's the whole point of creating that undertone. And with the voiceover of this one, because the video I couldn't edit it back anymore, there is, let's say, time lapse in here. Like for example, this is speeded up this area, but I've shown you how to start it off, and we're just repeating that process all the way over. You can see just how much I've knocked that back. And what I'll do is I'll make sure that I pop up when I finish the editing on this. I'll pop up some scans, so you'll actually have a scan of that bottom area, and you'll see just how much that black has knocked it back. Almost like it's dulling it, I suppose. We're dulling all those lovely glossy highlights that we popped in. So here I'm just I'm using the brown pastel matte here. For some reason the texture on this one, like I say, there's always a variation in the texture, even using the same shade that you've used before. When I put my Polychromo super sharp black down onto this to create some of these flicky lines, they were actually going on quite smooth. Normally you need to work over them, you know, with a pencil that matches your background colour and then go back in over with your black again. But it was going on lovely and smooth, not a rough line at all. So I'm just showing you here that that's what I was doing, just flicking those lovely long glossy strands of fur out from the neck. As you can see here, I've got my glassine paper under my hand the whole time. Especially with this black, it's really easy to move that black pigment around. And if you don't work on the brown, if you're working on a white paper or something, anyone who's tried working any colour on the white paper, the white pastel matte, especially if you've got loose black layers going out, down dry layers, it smudges so much, and you really do struggle to try and lift it off again. Okay, so it's just exactly like we did on that side of the ear and across the face into the other ear. We're just working the whole area, intensifying the super black areas and just softening back the brightest, see there's just the brightest highlight area, the greys and the whites as well. So we're going to speed up again now. Just repeat that process. You can see I'm actually laying the pigment down all over. Even up over those highlighted areas there that you can see. Now there might be some areas, as I was saying earlier on this video, because I've edited down and it's still nearly 2 hours long, I'm not going to be doing a voiceover for the whole thing. So if it's an area where it's literally just repeating what I've said before, I won't repeat myself again and again. It's literally just following exactly the same process for each layer. So there you see how much we've knocked back all of those highlights. We've softened them all back. So now I'm going to go in with a dark indigo, and just starting again, look at your reference photo. We're just going to start popping back in some of those lovely rich indigo areas in amongst the shadows. Now the black contours through into the glossy white highlights, and it goes through the dark tones and the mid-tones before it hits that white, super white glossiness, then sinks away again through the mid-tones into the darks. So again, your dark is your black, going up into your indigo or your Morton violet, and then into your warm or your cool mid-greys, up into your light greys and your white for the most intense highlight area, and then it'll sink away again then through your mid-tones, down into your darks, your indigo and your Morton violet, and away into your black. And that's the secret of these, just creating the contours of these curls. Dark, all the darks, underneath or into the deepest recess. So the deepest recess on the dog is always that point underneath the ear into the side of the cheek. And the highlights are going to be the areas where the light is hitting the dog. So with Lennie here, like I say, we know it's coming from that right hand side, from the front right hand side. So it's coming up over the brow area, hitting the top right hand side of the head, down over the ear, some little bits across the back, across the scruff of the neck, and obviously on the right hand side, that those curls as it just curls underneath the ear on the right hand side. So again, just intensifying these darkest shadows over to the left hand side where the light isn't hitting it as much. Going over there now, over where those warm greys are. So we've got our base layer on there, then we've gone over it with the black, and now we're going over it all with the indigo. Just keep flicking your eyes back, like I say, to that reference photo. And you will have some indigo coming up from the dark of the black here into your orangey reds. So I'm going to pop a little bit of indigo in there, and we'll also have some Morton violet in there later on as well. So again, you can see I'm being quite methodical with this. We did that whole layer of black, and now we're doing this whole layer with indigo. And I'm just working, you know, from left to right. Obviously, if you're left-handed, you work from right to left. Okay, so just speeding the video up again now. Got the idea of what I was doing. So again, we're just going to repeat that all the way across and down over that ear. Again, we need those darks in place for the lights to sit over the top of them. Lots of people keep asking, what is it? What white pencil is it that you're using to create the white over the top of the black? And it's not about what pencil we're using. It's about what surface we're working on. It's the pastel mat, it's the sanded paper or the sanded effect paper. It just allows for more layers, it allows for more grip. Okay, so you see there we did that whole layer with our indigos. Now we're going to go in with our Morton violet. If you haven't got the Mortimer Violet, I could put Mortimer 2, but it's a bit warmer than the Mortimer Violet. So here we're just looking for where the red tones are within the black fur. And obviously there is some around our brow area where the black fur sits over the top of the orangey fur. We're going to get more reds showing through. So there was a little hints of the indigo in there as well. Hopefully, as I say, your eyes, as you work your way through the amount of times you're looking back at that reference, you start to see some of these tones and colours actually within the black fur yourself. And again, if you see other colours in there, pop other colours in. You can follow this absolutely religiously as to how I do it, or you can create your own version. There's no rules, remember. So just by popping in some of that violet shade just in under the brow, it's just given that brow a nice little bit of shape already. Even though we're not working on texture yet, we're literally just still working on colour blocking, getting our contrasts in our darkest area, and colour blocking in and enriching that dark contrast with our blues and reds to really enrichen it. See me pausing every now and again as well, so I'm looking at the reference, and you'll find as you work one area, all of a sudden it's sort of like, oh, it pulls out again. I think I've mentioned this before, maybe on the previous video. You'll pop a little bit of red or blue down in one area, and all of a sudden it becomes more obvious that it's also visible and apparent in another area. So your eyes get distracted of like, oh, there's a little bit of this colour, this shade up there too. So I was obviously working around the eye and then spotted, oh, up around the top of the head. I need to pop some of this in now. So again, you don't have to follow me religiously, that's just how I'm seeing things. But if you do see little bits of the red in other areas, or if you think, oh, there's not quite enough blue in that area, pick up your blue pencil again, your indigo again, and pop a bit back in. If you want to enrich in your black a little bit more as you go, and go, oh, actually I could add a bit more in there, pop some more in. Remember, you're not, even though you're following my guide regarding pressure and colours, you're not here, you weren't here when I created Lennie to feel or see exactly close up how much pigment I was putting down. So maybe you might need to do an extra layer of the black or an extra layer of the indigo, you know, compared to me. Maybe you'll have to do less if you're applying slightly more pressure than I am. Again, you can sort of get a guide from this, but in general, if you're working to the pressure guide video that I created and you've practiced that, and you've done your test piece off to one side as well, then you should be applying the pressure pretty much similar to how I am. So it's sort of like a pressure 3 to 5. So just sped the video up again now. You can see I'm dotting in the direction of the fur, all those reds. So that's all the reds gone in there now. Okay, so we're flicking now to one of our mid-tone pencils. Again, staying with the polychromos, using one of our mid cool greys just over on that side. Exact pencils will obviously all be in the material list for you. So we're just lifting up so basically we've had our underpainting on those little highlight areas on that ear. We've then gone in and we've knocked it back with the black, gone over it with the indigo, gone over a couple of the little areas with our violet, and now we're going over it with our grey. You can see literally we're going on here with a mid grey, not even one of the light greys, just how much it's lifting that already. So a little touch of white just going in over the top. We'll probably knock that back again as well. It's just to really lift it out. And our pencils are lovely and sharp here as well. Back in now with our mid grey. And here again, I say if you put in a little bit too much of the grey, then you can just knock it back again by going over it with the black. And again, obviously each time you really sharpen your pencils up as well, it just cuts through and creates that little bit more texture. It's quite surprising actually, once you've got your really rich black base down, how easily it is to create that glossy fur. It almost simplifies the process, I think, anyway, working dark to light, especially using black fur. I think pastel matte and sandpaper is the secret behind creating it in this, using this technique anyway. Literally just those few little touches that I popped in there. So we've only used sort of like the whites just up on the very top left, about halfway up that ear. All the rest is being placed in with this mid grey, and you can just see the effect that it's had already just by popping in those few odd little marks, just placing them in just the right place. And again, I did use sort of a little bit of artistic license over on this ear because you can't see very much of it. It is so dark. But again, I'm going to show you in one of the little hints and tips videos as well, if your photo is too dark, how you can inject some light into it. I'm going to show that on a separate video, and how you can enhance your reference photos, how to bring out the detail, how to convert it to bring out the contrast, the highlights and lowlights, and also how to enrich the colours. So I'll show you that on a separate video anyway. And that'll be using sort of the little program that I use called Be Funky, which I've mentioned before. So again, we're zooming in now just so you can see me working a little bit more detail. So you can just see there the area that I worked with that mid-warm grey, just how much it's already lifted out. So I'm going back in now with the black and cutting back into it with the black, and then back through with the grey. And tiny little touch of highlight there going in. double check if that is the white or whether it is my cool grey 1 that I'm using there, because it is very light, but I don't think it is actually the white. I'll just double check. I've got a feeling it's cool grey 1 that I'm using for the highlights on that side. I only tend to use the white for the very brightest highlights, so up over the brow I'll use it, but then I will cut into it as well. So I'm just speeding up now, so we're rotating again between our black, our mid grey, and our lightest light grey there, which is the cool grey 1. I did pop in a tiny bit of light flesh there on the outer side of the eye where I spotted it. So again, we're just going to now, I've sped it up, and we're going to repeat that process all over the portrait. So we'll start to lift some of the highlights now with the warm grey. Okay, so I've just picked up my burnt ochre there and my light flesh, and because I'm working up sort of left to right on those dark areas, I've just wanted to pop in some of that brow area flicking up into those dark areas. Sometimes I do need to do this on a piece. I need to add in a tiny touch of balance and detail. So for here it's just the eye, it just helps me see that what effect it's going to create. It's almost like a little practice run for what else I'm going to add in later on. I think in my head that that's what I need to do and how it's going to work and the colours that I need. So sometimes I just need to pop them in partway through the process just to confirm it in my head that that's how it's going to work. So here again, I'm just doing that light flesh up over here. Just in a few little areas where I've spotted it. Just wanted to soften that back. So even though I'm trying to work the whole thing in a nice logical manner for you, there's the odd times where I get distracted. So here again, I'm going in with that cool grey 1. I'm just playing here really, so I'm just checking what is actually working and what isn't going to work. I do apologise for this video if at any point you hear a dog crying in the background. It's because it's my little Sherlock. I'm recording this at home and I've had to shut him out so that I can, because he was in here playing with a toy earlier and I've had to shut him out, and now he's I can hear him in the background somewhere crying because he wants some attention. So if you can hear him, I'm very sorry. But hopefully no, you can't. So I'm using very light strokes here with this, so very light pressure strokes with this light grey. I'm literally using it. We've gone over some of this area with the warm mid grey, but I'm just using this now just to lift some of those highlight areas back in, just to give some more contour. And sometimes with this as well, I repeat the process of working from dark to light, and then I go back down to dark, because sometimes when you add the pigment, it's still going on with the texture, it still looks quite rough. And especially with Lennie's fur, the last thing we want is roughness of the paper showing through. We don't want that enhancing or influencing the texture of the fur in any way. because Lennie's fur isn't rough or textured like that at all. It's soft, it's shiny, it's glossy, it's long fur. So again, lots of long sweeping movements in creating Lennie's fur, because even the fur that comes up over his head, it's not like the fur on some of the other animals that we've worked on where it's short and stubbly as it comes up over the head. It is long and flowing, so the hair that comes up over the head comes right the way up over the top of his head. Again, this is a perfect example of a type of fur a dog to actually sort of go up and have a good feel of. If you see one out, and if you obviously ask permission, please might come up and, you know, sort of a quick feel of your dog's fur and ears, and explain to the person, you know, if you see one out, explain to the owner, I'm an artist, you know, sort of, it's really good for me to understand fur texture and length and direction on different dogs. And I say a Cavalier Spaniel is a perfect one to sort of get your hands on, so to speak. So you see here, I'm sort of adding back in some of that gloss, but not really. I'm just marking it in with this light pencil. We'll define it more with some more darks, some more mid-tones, and then the super lights as well later on in further layers later on. So I'm really careful to make sure I'm following the direction here as well. It's a really key point to know, to get that on the right hand side where you've got the bright, it's going to be the brightest highlight later on that right hand brow. You need to make sure when you sweep that pencil in towards the darkest area that you're getting it emerging from just the right point above that right eye. Because here, if you get your fur direction wrong, you can really misshape the head. And like I say, the heads on these dogs are very specialist to the breed. So again, you don't want to foreshorten or lengthen the head in any way. So that's why you got to keep your eye on that reference photo, keep your lines and your angles and your measurements and your fur direction. Lots to think about all in one go. But very achievable, because I know how talented you guys are. And it's just practice. Especially those of you that are in the mentoring tier, you know, the improvements just from looking differently and looking at how, say, the curl on the bottom right hand side of Lennie's ear, you can put a diagonal line from maybe the right hand corner of it straight up through his eyes, and it'll come out straight through the corner, the far left corner of Lennie's left ear as you look at it as well. Again, you just lay a pencil, lay a ruler down on your reference drawing, reference photo, and then move that ruler or pencil across your drawing and see that it's heading in the exact same direction at the same angle. Measurements, and obviously, you know, using a tool just to guide your eye and line things up is a really good thing to have. So now you can see I have actually picked up the white pencil now. I'm using a really light pressure here because up over the top of that fur there is like a light layer of fur that gives texture. So we're using the white, and we're also using it again just to start to increase those highlights. You see I take the pencil in different directions. I'll bring it back down or up and away. I push up and away quite a lot. Just feeling my way around, just sort of like, okay, that little area needs a little bit more contrast, a little bit more highlight. There you go, I've zoomed in. This looks a little clearer now that I've zoomed in. So again, use the pastel mat, use the texture of the paper, tactile, you'll feel the pencil being gripped. Rather than relying on what you can see, rely on what you can feel as well. And you're lifting the pencil away, so as you come down and as you go up away from the brightest area, that's when you lift your pencil so there's less pressure. As you go over the brightest area, you can add a little bit more pressure and then lift away again. And that will do one of two things. It will both increase the intensity of pigment in the area that you've pressed hardest, and also at the areas where you've pressed the least, it will give you a finer line. So I'm not using a lot of pressure here, I'm just relying on light layers and feeling that pencil go down. Just creating that contour. You can do this in sort of any order you want. I mean, I've done his neck and his back later on in this video and then come back and finished the bits of his head that flick up over the neck. I mean, if you want to fast forward and work on the scruff of the neck and his back first, because back in that area you're not using much super highlights, you're using your darks. So you on that back area you'll use your black, your indigo, your violet, and then some of your mid grey and possibly a little touch of a lighter grey. But it's a good place to maybe start in that back area, just if you're not feeling totally confident in going in on your brow area first, and that'll give you a little bit of practice and a little bit of feel for the paper and also how those darks and mids go over that black back there. And then you can come back and rewind the video to the start and then start on the left hand ear and up over the head and do all this detail. Just popping in here a little rim of white highlight around Lennie's eye. You'll notice on Lennie's eye there's like a big sort of, it's a bit of a messy area just on the inner area of inside corner of that right hand eye, which his owner asked me to clean up. It was a bit of sort of like gunk from Lennie's eye that we omitted from the actual drawing itself, so it won't match up exactly to your reference. But again, it's good experience. Your client can ask you anytime, can you remove his collar, can you remove the harness, can you remove the bridle, or can you add his collar, can you add his tag, lots of things. So just be prepared for anything really with commission work. But in here it wasn't too bad. It was a good choice to just clean up Lennie's eye down in that corner. Okay, so we've popped in, we used the whites and we've used that light grey for some of those highlights, and now we'll, any areas then where it starts to merge into one big mass of white or grey, we'll then go back in with our black pencil and just cut through it a little bit again. So we'll increase anywhere that we've lost a little bit of the real dark contrast, we'll pop that back in, and then we'll work back down into that brow, and then we'll go up into it from below as well. So this part of the video, some of it's real time, this part is only sped up twice because I feel that you can see what I'm doing there, because I'm hesitating quite a lot anyway as I look at the reference to make sure I'm getting all this placement right. So I'm using the white there as well. I've used the black to cut back into it. Now I'm using the white with a little bit more pressure. I'm pushing away and pulling it down over the brow. And how I describe it is obviously with each dry layer that you do, it just gets more refined. With Lennie, we've gone in with the refinement stage quite early on. A lot of times we do a lot more colour blocking because we are literally using quite a limited palette on our dark areas on the black fur. It allows us to get to this stage a lot sooner. You'll notice I've probably gone up around the top of the head there 3 or 4 times with that white. Let's grab the dark indigo now. So again, where the blacks merge in up through into the light areas. Remember, we go through our darks, up into our lights, up into our bright, which is our white, and then away into our lights and into our darks again. You see, those are our colours that we're using. We've got our black, Morton violet, our indigo, our white, and our warm light grey, or mid grey, sorry. So we've sped up again now, but you can see to the left hand side how refined and how much texture is already going in there. So we're just going to repeat that now, and we're going to come back over. We're just softening a little bit back with that warm mid grey there as well. You get a little hint of just that fur texture, that long fur texture over the top of the head that I mentioned. Just creates a softness. So here I'm just popping back in some of the Morton violet. Where we've added in a lot of the whites and the greys, we've lost some of our colourful undertones. So again, just going to pop those back in down over here, because it is quite cool off to the left hand side, but there is some lovely warmth in through there as well that we need to just pop back in. I'm really hoping by this point that you are seeing the indigos and the violets in your own reference. So you're understanding, you're not just copycatting what I'm doing, you're actually seeing it yourself, and being able to transfer that across now into your drawing. Don't worry if you're not, it all comes with time and with practice, but I'm really hoping that some of you are. Like I say, from the results that I've seen from some of you following the tutorials, I'm super happy. I love the versions that you're doing, because I can see that yes, you are following the tutorials, you're following my guidance, you're following the technique that I'm giving you, but you are coming up with your own versions. I'm sure in a couple of months' time I'll put maybe 10 polar bear, the white on black polar bear images that you guys have done all next to each other, and they will all look different. They'll all be the same, exactly like the donkeys and the spaniels that I teach on the workshops. They'll be the same, recognisably the same, but they will also be absolutely unique. So your style will be coming through. Even if you don't realise that you're developing your style whilst you're following a tutorial, you really are. You see there, we've just done a bit more refinement again. We popped in some of the violet, a little bit of the darks again, and now we go back in with our white and start to enhance the highlights. I think even with myself, I'm very tentative when I first start out. Even with the years of practice and the amount of drawings that I've done, I'm still tentative with every single portrait of like, okay, I'm pretty sure in my head, I'm saying 90% sure in my head of what colours to use, what pressure to use, where I'm placing it. I still was feeling my way quite a lot earlier on, but now I'm relaxing and going, yeah, okay. Plus, of course, I've got a good foundation up to that left-hand side to work out from now as well. It's like, yeah, I know what I can achieve and how I achieved those, that effect using the pencils that I did in and the layers and the pressure that I used. So I can just follow that through now and repeat it all the way down over this right hand ear. So again, now I've just gone back in. It's sort of something's caught my eye that I just need to increase a little bit of the texture and the contrast through that brow. I'll probably touch it up 2 or 3 more times, to be honest. It's a work in progress all the way across. Okay, so we're going to speed up again now. Like I said, we're just going to repeat that process. We're going in with that warm grey first of all to start to lift out some of the highlights from the darkness. Adding in a little bit of our mortar violet. Okay, here I just noticed when I got to this point that there was actually a little bit of burnt ochre through that ear. If you look at the reference photo, you will actually see that there is some burnt ochre. Whether it's, I don't think it's reflecting off his face at all. There is actually just some tones probably coming out from underneath his ear in that long fur. So I've just, because I've spotted it, I've just popped it in. Okay, so down this side I'm actually going in with my white because this is a super bright area. I'm actually popping in the highlights first because I really want to pop those forwards, and then I can start to balance them up over that the top of the head as well and know how strong I want them. Okay, now I'm going with the indigo and I'm softening the light area, sinking away into the darkness. So a little touch of the mortar violet there as well in places, just doing exactly the same. It's quite strange doing the voiceovers for these videos. I actually find it quite therapeutic. I actually learn from them myself just by watching myself work. So I'm really, really glad that we're to be creating these for you, because they're actually helping me too, because I can look at this and I'll watch this again when I actually write the full tutorial, the written tutorial, get that one typed up. I'll watch this back a couple of times. So by the end of it, yeah, I feel like I've drawn him all over again. But you see here now, I've gone into those really dark areas in underneath his ear, and I'm pulling that darkness out over those dark tones of the violet and the indigo. So you can see, on the left hand side we went from the darks to the up through our dark tones to our lights, and here we've gone from our lights down into our mid and dark tones right into the black. So you can work it, whichever way you prefer. If you want to put your highlights in first and then your darks, and then bring the two together with your indigos and your violet and your midtones and greys, you can. Or if you want to go from your darks up into your lights, then do it that way, and then just repeat it. There's no wrong way as long as your end result, your darks up into your lights and away into your darks again, matches. And you see here I've just lost where I went over it with the indigo and the black and the white and the grey. I lost the burnt ochre, so I'm just Carefully placing that back in there again now. Okay, so we're popping in that burnt ochre, and the thing is with that burnt ochre, it's one of those things, like I mentioned before, once you start popping it into one area, you start to notice that it's actually visible in other areas as well. So at this point I do spot that, okay, there's a little bit of burnt ochre around there, little touch of it just through other areas of the ear. Again, we can soften them back later on, but wherever you see a colour or a shade or anything, just pop it in. Like I say, that's the beauty of the pastel mat, is if you put a little bit too much of it in, you can just knock it back with a different pencil on the next layer. So you see here as well now, I've got my white pencil, super sharp. I'm going in and just really working on that super bright highlight across the bottom of that curl. I'll pull that light down into the darkness and then push it away up into the darkness. So out of the shadows into the light. Push up and pull it down, pushing it up. And I say, as you push up into the darkness or pull down, you lift off the pressure as you come to the end of the pencil stroke. Little touches of the white in places, variants of pressure. Again, under this ear is a little bit like the ear we did on the left hand side. We're just putting in little hints of the shape that the fur is making in the shadows. Just little touches. And obviously coming up over the curls of the ear, just increasing the intensity of that brightest light hitting those curls. So again, just push up away into the darkness and pull away down into the darkness. And then again, if we put in too much of the white or the greys and we've created a block of colour or contrast, that's when then we'll sharpen up our indigo or our black and we'll cut back into it. We'll work from the shadows into the light rather than light into the shadows. So again, speeding up the video just to repeat what we were doing down over that ear, and here we go, we're going back in now with our black and just cutting through from the shadows up into the light and just popping in some of the texture, breaking up some of those chunks of light area that we've popped in there. And if we take it back too much, then we can just go in with our white and just push back up into it again. Again, that's the beauty of the pastel mat. You can just keep repeating the process, dark to light to dark to light. I will just mention the base that Lennie's working on. Obviously, I mentioned in the first part of the videos that in the reference photo he was lying on a white leather sofa, and we came to an agreement with the client that I'd pop him on a creamish white surface. But please, please choose whatever colour you want to put Lennie on. If you just want to put a shadow underneath him, that's fine. You don't have to put him on white or cream. I found it was really harsh, to be honest. So please do, if you want to pop them on a lovely blue blanket or something textured or a stone floor or even lying on grass, please do so. So we've switched to working on the brows now, and we're using our burnt ochre. This is our sanguine that we're going in with now. So we're just intensifying some of the colours, first of all, blocking in the colours, and then we'll pop in a little bit of texture. These brows don't actually take a huge amount of work, to be honest. Not a huge amount of texture in there. So again, we're just using the Morton Violet again there now. So that's the burnt ochre, then the sanguine, now the Morton Violet. We're cutting back down and pushing up away from the darkness in to the more orangey tones. And back in again now and glaze over the top again with our burnt ochre. I've switched here, I've popped in, that's the Caran d'Ache cream. I just find it's the Pablo, sorry, and I just find it is actually quite creamy texture. That's why that one's going in there. You could use the polychromo. I just find the polychromo sharpens to a harder point and cuts through, rather than this Caran d'Ache Pablo sort of blends and softens that fur. It just gave me a little bit more of the texture I wanted. So just softening that back again now with the burnt ochre. Again, I flick that burnt ochre up into the black as well. You can't see it too visible to the eye, but it does just give a hint of the burnt ochre blending away up into that dark fur. Again, back in with the Morton Violet. Okay, and this time when I go back in with that Pablo, I'm being a little bit more refined of my placement. Again, super sharp black polychromo as well, cutting through, creating some texture in there, pulling it down. It's a sanguine again there now, nice and bright. It's your brightest orange in your polychromo range. That's the Morton Violet again as well. So you can see you sort of like working up into the brow and then away from the brow, and then softening it back with your burnt ochre. Your burnt ochre is your underlying shade there. That's the white just coming up there where we've got a couple of brow whiskers. You don't tend to use your white on your orangey warm areas. You tend to use your ivory and your cream, simply because your white is quite cold. It might be the odd time you put a tiny little touch, but I can notice when I'm at workshops and I can go around, I can see where someone's put a white pencil obviously down on a warm area. This is a warm area here. So we're using creams, we might use light flesh, but it's mainly because it's warm, we want to keep it warm, so that's why we use an ivory or a cream. White is too harsh, white is quite cold, and it just stands out, and it makes it look like it's a white aging whisker or something within that fur rather than a creamy highlight. That's the difference. Try it on a sample piece of paper and you'll see the difference between putting a white down over the ochre as putting the cream down over it to blend. It's just too cold. So again, just going to repeat what we did over on that left hand side now with this right hand brow, just intensifying the shadow around it. I'm using our burnt ochre and our sanguine. Just softening around the edge of that brow, so flicking it up into the black. This is another of the Caran d'Ache Pablos here. I need to check the colour of this again. I'm not super au fait yet with the Pablo colours. I can name all of the polychromo ones that I use, and obviously the Albrecht Duras, but the Pablos, Caran d'Ache range, they're just named quite differently, like they are literally grey, light grey, dark grey. So I just need to check the colour of this one exactly. Wasn't quite there in the polychromo range. There is the Caput Mortem. You could have mixed it probably with the Caput Mortem and using the Sanguine, but I had my Pablos there and I saw that was a colour that I needed, so I grabbed it. So again here I've got that Caran d'Ache Pablo, that ivory cream, just putting in the highlights and the texture on this right hand brow. Notice it starts to give it some direction as well, because you can see which way those fur and the brow hairs are actually going, which way direction they're going in. So I could put Mortimer Violet now. I'm just pulling down from the darks down into the top of the brow. Back in with our sanguine that we used first of all in that. Just softening that inner edge of that brow as well, and the fur that flicks away into the black, just softening it where it meets, so it doesn't look like a standalone brow, that it actually does blend into the fur around there as well. Tiny bits of texture added in. That cream and ivory. A little bit of balancing with burnt ochre. And that's pretty much it for those brows. So now we are back to pretty much repeating what we've done with the fur up over the top, but obviously just looking at the length of the fur now down around underneath the eye. We're just rotating between our black, our white, our mid-grey, and a touch of the burnt ochre there. And here it is still soft, shiny fur. It's not stubbly like on a lot of dogs around the nose and the muzzle. So it's still got a sheen to it. So again, but it's much shorter. You just need to keep an eye on the direction as well of the fur. So it does come away from the muzzle up towards the stop of the nose, so up over the top of the nose, but between the eyes, and then where you've got the eyes itself, it always comes down and then away. It doesn't just go out to the right hand side. You can see it sweeps down, and on the inner corner it comes in towards the inner corner of the eye. So always keep an eye on your fur direction. So again, we're just building up over the muzzle itself. So it's the orangey areas, we're just using the warms. We've got ivory, we've got our sanguine, we've got that rust pablo in there. Put in little touches of black and indigo and the Morton violet for our dark areas. Starting to build the texture and the shadows. We've worked the nose a little bit. I'm just going to contour it a little bit more. So we only use the white highlight up over the black areas, and then we use this cream ivory over the orangey areas. It's a simplified way of saying black and orange, or tan. Black and tan areas, I suppose, is the more precise way, correct way of describing the colour. Again, super sharp pencils. Any area again that we've put in our lights and our mids and it's become a bit too blended and soft, losing the texture, we just go back in with our black and cut back up through it. Won't be any knife work on Lennie. You could put some in if you wanted, but because I was working on the brown pastel matte as well, I didn't actually want any of the brown matte coming through, so I chose not to use a knife at the end of this one at all, creating any texture. So here we've got the sanguine, flicking out little touches into the darkest areas, working around that muzzle. Lots of texture here. Again, we'll come in with, that's the other light that we'll use, will be our light flesh. We use our ivory or cream on the orangey areas. We also use our light flesh. That's our other light that we will use on a warm area. You see how I'm glazing over the top where I put that ivory cream in and it's quite harsh. I'm just glazing over it here with the sanguine. Just a light pressure area. Some areas I'll push a little bit harder if I feel it needs a tiny touch more pigment. But just working around. You'll notice some of that ochre colour is part of the cheek, whereas some of it here is actually quite a pronounced little muzzle. So I'm just differentiating between the two. So again, just glazing over the ivory, just softening it back. Any area that's a little bit too yellowy or creamy, just glazing it back with that sanguine. It's the white there, just flicking up into, there is actually white whiskers around here, and flicking up into that black fur. And again on the nose, it's mainly black and then indigo and then a touch of the white. As here we've got white whiskers just there on that side. Back in with our sanguine. And just notice with every layer of pencil that you put down, it just softens the layers underneath. They blend. People ask, oh, could you need, can you use OMS to blend? Yes, you can, but you don't need to. Just allow your pencils to do all the blending. I'd say the more layers that go down, if you put a light over the top and then back in with a dark or a mid-tone, it just blends so much more. So again, here's what I was mentioning about that that colour that is lying on. Please do choose whatever colour that you want to make Lennie lie on. Okay, so now we're going back and we're repeating exactly what we started off doing on the left hand side right at the beginning of the video. We're going in across this top and knocking it all back, increasing the depth of the dark shadows using just the black. We literally are just repeating that same process. Then we go back in with the indigo, work all the way over there. Because I can't flick the fur of that right hand side of that ear over that neck yet because the neck's not in place. So we need that neck to be finished so that I can then flick the highlights of that ear up over the top. Like I say, work from the back forwards. So if you already did, like I said earlier on, if you weren't fully happy to come and work straight onto the brow, if you did start with the back and then scruff the neck, you would already all have this in place. So you would be already there to be able to flick the fur detail of the top of the head and that ear up over the top of the neck. So there isn't as much highlight and you don't want to draw too much attention to the back and the neck. So you're just using the light grey again just to place in some highlights catching that fur, but you don't want to make it super glossy and bright as those white ones down over the brow because you want to really project that brow and that ear forwards. You don't want it to be of the same tonal value contrast as the neck, otherwise you're flattening the whole picture. You're bringing the neck and the back forward to have equal intensity as the head and the face where you want all the attention to go. As you see here, little touches of highlight going in there just to show where the light's hitting that curl. Now we can build the area behind the neck and then flick the ear up over it. It does amaze me watching this, how apparently little or how quickly the effect works just from a few touches of pencil. That fur across the neck and the back goes from looking really flat and dull to super shiny and glossy just with the magical touch of a few pencils. It's amazing. Well, it still amazes me. So just using that light grey pencil there. Blocking in those big chunky highlights. You can always tell when I'm in the flow with a picture that my pencils do sort of come out of the tin, out of the box, into my hand because I'm rotating them so much. Because I'm in the flow and I'm working at a really nice speed. This is sped up a tiny bit. This is 1.5 times speed, so pretty much close to real time. I've only sped up a tiny bit because of obviously all the points where I'm hesitating. Look at the reference photo. Just cuts those out a tiny bit. So I was keeping my hand. I've got my black, I've got my darks, my indigo and my Morton violet. I've got a mid-grey, light grey and my white, and I'm just rotating between them. If I lose a bit too much of one, I just pop it back in. Lose a bit too much of a shadow, just pop it back in. Lose too much of a highlight, just pop it back in. Just rotate them. Okay, so just ignore this little bit. I've sped it up just to show that I put in a base layer of the watercolour pencil. Now I've gone back in with it whilst it's still wet and put a little bit more in, and obviously I'm using my finger just to blend it and soften it a little bit. I'll work it and add a tiny bit of texture to it as well. And then I will put in a shadow just under Lennie's ear and under his muzzle, just to give the impression he is actually lying on that surface. And I can also obviously flick some of the finer hairs now. See, I've got that little shadow just running around the side of the muzzle there, just to show that the light direction's coming from that right hand side. Now we can start around that muzzle, just adding in the final texture. So again, we can pop in our whiskers. Make sure you're starting these off at the right point. You're pressing and lifting away so that your whisker, like in reality, is thicker at the base as it is to the end. You see that I've gone back to the nose. I'm just measuring out. I'm just making sure that I'm lining up my whiskers. They're all coming out at the right place. So just referring back to, where the nostrils are, making sure everything's in relationship to each other. So just getting in those whiskers, super sharp pencil, like I say, get the right starting position in the right place, thicker at the base, and then lift away. So it's all these little whiskers and little lines that really just give the finishing touches. And So, you know, that's just brought him forward instantly over the top of that shadow that I put down on the sofa below him. This part's real time now. Again, just keeping my eye on that reference photo. Marking in this nose, getting the shapes, getting the nostrils in the right place, right angles. Remembering where the light source is, and how the light's going to hit that nose, where those lightest little highlights are going to be. Sorry, I've kind of stopped the dialogue here because really, if you're following the video, it sort of speaks for itself in the what I'm doing, because you can see quite clearly real time. Most noses that I do, there's a lot of colour in there as well, but with this one it is kept it quite basic depiction. It is literally just the black, a touch of indigo, and the white highlight. So again here we're just popping back in almost our original line drawing, our shape. Putting our shadows in first, working outwards to make sure we've got that texture. Okay, so it's sped up a tiny bit now, so it's double speed now. It's not too fast, because obviously in the super fast areas that's actually 32 times speed. So this is just double speed, so 2 times, so you can still follow what I'm doing. Super sharp pencil, I'm just feeling my way with that black pencil up almost dividing between each whisker, each of the light whiskers. I tend to keep my pencil on the pastel mat quite a bit. Usually I sort of either scumble or I move the pencil around, keeping it on the paper and then lifting off rather than touch, 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 touch. Keep it on there all the way up here, feeling my way around, adding a bit more pressure where I want more intensity. It really is all about keeping an eye on your reference photo. I'm working like from the back forwards again now. I need those cheeks to be in place before I can come forward onto that muzzle a little bit more as well. I'm making the little tiny whiskers lie on that sofa. It's all about patience, this area, whereas you could get into the flow on the black fur higher up. Around here we're creating texture, creating a lot of expression with this little mouth here as well. And it's the part that's closest to the viewer of the portrait. So I imagine you probably look at Lennie's eyes first, but this is where all the texture is here in this front. It's stubbly, but it's not that rough, hard stubble like on a lot of dogs. It's still soft. A few little white whiskers there as well. This is the ivory cream again now. Remember what I said about these Pablos, when they blend, they create a really lovely soft texture, like in those brows. It just created a lovely soft effect, creamy. Hence why I'm just using the two together just down through this muzzle area here as well. So again, you can use the texture of the paper. You can use your pencil strokes. It's also something, the type of pencil that you use, or if you mix it, say, with pan pastel, or how you apply it. There's all different ways of creating the texture that you want. And in just this portrait, the simple portrait, we've used several different types of method of application to create the different textures in the final portrait. So this is still double speed now. You can see just how much attention from this than we are putting into this muzzle area. Touches of our sanguine going back in again now. Just little touches. You can see those little touches, just how much of a difference it makes. It really, really lifts the colour back in where we've lost some. So again, keep an eye on your reference photo of the individual direction of some of these little hairs around his muzzle. I see some artists, they sort of create almost perfection in the fur direction of their subjects, but it sort of loses the character of that specific dog. It makes them too perfect. Lennie here, he's got, a few odd little stray bits of fur or hairs that are just heading in the wrong direction, but that's what makes him Lennie. If you try and smooth them out and go, yep, they should all be coming down and then heading away in this direction, that makes it a perfect, perfect fur coat. That's fine, but it then stops being Lennie. You want the lightness to be as close to the character, dog, the image that you're trying to depict. You only make the changes, especially on a commission piece, if your client requests you to. And also, as well, if they can supply supporting reference to show what it is they mean. Or if the dog is quite generic and you can look up another dog of the same breed and show that to your client and say, well, is this what you mean? Is this how you want them to look? I did have a Rottweiler that I did that was blind in one eye, and that was, that was him. So she didn't want me to perfect him. She wanted him depicted, with the obvious blind eye. Whereas I had another client whose cat had been injured in an accident, and it wasn't a nice memory. So she asked me if I could depict the cat with two good eyes. Again, it's just something that you will, if you're doing commission work, that you talk to your clients about. So see how many layers we've now put in around this muzzle and this cheek now, just building, and it's still blending beautifully. It's still, each colour that you pop back in there, it's still applying beautifully and intensely. And I'm not using much pressure. It's all about the more finer, the lighter the layers that you put on, the softer it gets, the more it blends. Like I say, each time you lose a little bit of the your original base colour, like your sanguine here again. You just pop it back in once, if you lose it a little bit. A little bit of the burnt ochre popping back in as well. I'm starting to get there now. We've got the texture created pretty much on that left hand side, but we need to still create the texture over here on the right now. Because we've marked in those follicle areas where those whiskers come out of there now. So let's go back up now and finish this cheek, so then we can come down over this, the muzzle, the end. I do remember doing this, and I did remember I went round and round and round and round on this muzzle. It did seem to take forever for it to build and build, but then it does start to come, the texture starts to come, and you can't rush it. If you wanted to do this in like 1 or 2 layers, then it just wouldn't look as refined and as full as texture and as soft as you possibly want to create. So here I'm just using that white Pablo here, just pressing in and marking in those really wet glossy highlights of that nose. And I have used it over some of the orangey area. That's because there's lots of white whiskers down here. You're not actually using it to blend the orangey areas of fur. So you'd use the cream and your light flesh for that. But there is actually texture of white whiskers over the top down here. That's why I'm using it. So you see here, I'm just placing it on that little nose area and giving a little wiggle so it leaves a little bit of white highlight over that area. You could do this with your Albrecht Dürer as well. You can just dampen the end of the nib, wait for it to go tacky, and then place it on to the surface, and it will just leave a real bright dot of white pigment on there. little touch of the medium flesh in here. Just the addition of those little white dots of Pablo have really made that nose lovely and wet and glossy now. Again, we don't overwork it, it's just enough. A little touch of the Indanthrin blue going in there as well, just because I love popping a little bit of blue onto the noses. Really lifts them. Obviously, if they're usually outside, then you've got a little bit of the sky reflecting in there. Normally, you can get away with it just by using your indigo and then using your grey or your white over the top. Just softening some of those edges there. Okay, we should be going in soon now and applying our final texture. Just rotating there between the nougat, and we've got our light cool grey again in here now. Just softening some of the highlight areas. Again, you can see there's not much pressure going down here. I'm just feeling my way around still. Just using that cool grey where I don't want anything, quite anything so bright as the white or as harsh. Tiny little touches make a huge difference. Again, a tiny little touch in the wrong place can make a huge wrong difference. So just keep your eye on your placement by keeping your eye on the reference photo at all times. A little bit of a dark sepia there. Just kind of pressing the pencil to the paper now, so it gives its own little impression of the pigment being released. I'm not really doing specific lines or movements with a pencil. It's just pressing it to the paper on that nose just to give some little dots, little impressions of pigment. Okay, so a bit of confidence here just to get these whiskers in. So again, press them into where the follicle comes out and lift away so that they're finer at the far end when you lift off. Okay, this is the final bits of texture now coming in down over this muzzle. I'm kind of drawing towards the end now of Lennie's video, so I hope that you've enjoyed this. I've made it say 3 longer videos than I intended, but I hope that you've learnt something from this. Any questions, please do just ask. Obviously, for those that are on the $10 reward tier and above, you'll be getting the written tutorial. I need to type the written tutorial up, but that will sit alongside this, and also you'll get your material list and all the details in there as well. Okay, so that's coming to the end of this final part of the video. I'll pop up the scanned image for you now of the finished version of Lennie. I really hope that you've enjoyed the full tutorial and look forward to seeing what you create. Okay, thank you very much.